How the elite print their wealth. Imagine two people. One wakes at 5 a.m., commutes an hour, works 8 hours, and earns $50 an hour. At the end of the week, after taxes, rent, food, and fuel, almost nothing remains. The other wakes at 10 a.m., makes 2 phone calls, and earns more by lunchtime than the first person will earn all month. Not because they work harder. Not because they are smarter. But because they operate in a different financial reality. The richest people in the world don't work for money the way you do. They don't save money the way you do. They don't borrow money the way you do. They are closer to the source of money creation itself. And that proximity, not intelligence, not luck, not even hard work, is the single greatest predictor of wealth in the modern era. This is the hidden system nobody talks about. Not in schools. Not on the evening news. Certainly not in political debates that blame immigrants, taxes, or lazy millennials for the growing gap between the wealthy and everyone else. For the next hour, we are going to pull back the curtain. We are going to follow the journey of money, from its birth, through its creation, into the hands of the elite, and finally toward the future that awaits us all. You may not like what you hear. You may find it uncomfortable. But by the end, you will understand something most people never will: how the elite print their wealth. And here is the most important truth to carry with you from the very beginning. Wealth is not the same as money. Money is a tool. Wealth is ownership. And those who control the printing of money also control who gets to own what. To understand wealth, we first need to understand where money comes from. Let us travel back thousands of years. Imagine a village. There is a farmer with sacks of wheat. There is a blacksmith who makes knives. There is a weaver who makes cloth. The farmer needs a knife. The blacksmith needs food. They trade. 1 sack of wheat for 1 knife. This is barter. But barter has a problem. What if the farmer needs a knife, but the blacksmith does not need wheat? What if the blacksmith needs cloth, but the weaver needs shoes, and the shoemaker needs wheat? Suddenly, you have a chain of trades that may never complete. So humans invented money. Not as a government decree. Not as a conspiracy. As a solution. The first forms of money were commodities, things that people wanted anyway. Salt. Cattle. Shells. In the Pacific Islands, the Yap people used giant stone wheels called rye stones. In West Africa, gold dust. In medieval England, silver pennies. Money solved the double coincidence of wants. You could sell your wheat for money, then use that money to buy anything from anyone. Money became the universal translator of value. But not all money is equal. Some money holds its value for centuries. Some money evaporates overnight. And that difference, that single difference, is where the elite first learned to print their wealth. For most of recorded history, the most reliable form of money was gold and silver. Why? Because you cannot create more of it easily. Mining gold is hard, expensive, and slow. The amount of gold in the world grows at roughly 1 to 2% per year. That means the value of gold stays relatively stable. Under the classical gold standard, which reached its peak in the 19th century, a country's money supply was directly tied to its gold reserves. If Britain had 100 tons of gold, it could print a certain number of pound notes, each redeemable for a fixed amount of gold. You could walk into a bank, hand over a paper note, and walk out with real gold. This system had advantages. Inflation was low. You could not print your way to prosperity. Governments could not secretly debase the currency to fund wars or bail out their friends. But it also had limitations. The money supply could not grow faster than the gold supply. In a growing economy with more people, more goods, and more trade, a fixed or slowly growing money supply meant falling prices. Deflation. And deflation, while good for savers, is brutal for borrowers. Farmers who took out loans to buy land found that their wheat sold for less each year, even as their debt remained the same. The gold standard also favored nations with gold mines or strong export economies. Britain, with its industrial revolution and global empire, accumulated vast gold reserves. Other nations struggled to keep enough gold to back their money. Still, for nearly a century, the world operated on gold. Then came a war so destructive it shattered the old order forever. World War I. European nations printed enormous amounts of paper money to pay for cannons, ships, and soldiers. They suspended the gold standard. After the war, Germany experienced the most famous hyperinflation in history. By 1923, the German mark was worth so little that people burned banknotes for warmth because the paper was cheaper than firewood. A loaf of bread cost billions of marks. Life savings vanished overnight. The world learned a terrifying lesson: paper money, not backed by anything real, can become worthless. After World War II, Allied nations created a new system at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The American dollar would be backed by gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency would be backed by the dollar. For a generation, this worked. International trade grew. Economies recovered. But America faced a problem. The more dollars were held overseas, the more dollars could be redeemed for American gold. Eventually, there were far more dollars in circulation than America had gold to back them. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon made a decision that changed the world forever. He announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars into gold for foreign governments. The dollar was now pure fiat money, money by government decree, backed by nothing but trust. What happened when money stopped being tied to gold? Everything. Here is something most people never learn, even after decades of using banks: when you deposit money, the bank does not keep it in a vault waiting for you to withdraw it. The bank lends most of it out. And when the bank lends it out, new money is created. This is called fractional reserve banking. And it is the single most important mechanism for money creation in the modern economy. Let me give you a concrete example. You deposit $1,000 in Bank A. The reserve requirement, the fraction the bank must keep, is 10%. That means Bank A can lend out $900. They lend it to a small business owner. That business owner pays $900 to a supplier. The supplier deposits that $900 in Bank B. Bank B keeps $90 and lends out $810. That $810 is deposited elsewhere. The cycle continues. Your original $1,000 has now become several $1,000s in total deposits across the banking system. Where did the extra money come from? It was created by the act of lending. Every loan creates a deposit. And every deposit, through the magic of reserves, allows another loan. This is not a conspiracy. It is not illegal. It is how modern banking has worked for centuries. But it has profound implications. The money supply expands when banks lend. It contracts when loans are repaid or default. And the power to decide who gets loans, and for what purpose, is enormous. Banks are not neutral intermediaries. They decide which neighborhoods get mortgage lending. Which businesses get expansion capital. Which industries thrive and which wither. And because the wealthy have assets, relationships, and credit histories, they are far more likely to receive newly created money first. Above the commercial bank sits the central bank. In the United States, it is the Federal Reserve. In the Eurozone, the European Central Bank. In Britain, the Bank of England. Central banks do not serve ordinary customers. They serve banks and governments. Central banks have two primary powers. First, they set interest rates. The interest rate is the price of money. When rates are low, borrowing is cheap. Businesses expand. Home buyers buy. When rates are high, borrowing is expensive. The economy slows. Second, central banks control the base money supply. They can create money electronically, literally pressing a keyboard, and use it to buy government bonds or other assets. This is called open market operations. And when central banks do this on a massive scale, it has a name you have heard: quantitative easing. The central bank also acts as the lender of last resort. When commercial banks are in trouble, the central bank can lend them money to prevent collapse. In 2008, when the global financial system was hours from total failure, the Federal Reserve and other central banks flooded the system with trillions of dollars of newly created money. So who actually creates money? The answer is multiple layers. Commercial banks create most of the money in circulation through lending. Central banks create the base reserves that commercial banks use. And governments, through their spending and borrowing, influence the entire system. But here is the counterintuitive truth: most new money enters the economy as debt. When a bank creates a loan, it simultaneously creates a deposit. That deposit is new money. When you take out a mortgage, that money did not exist before the loan. It was created at the moment of signing. Let me give you 3 real-world examples. First, a mortgage loan. You want to buy a $300,000 house. You have a $50,000 down payment. You borrow $250,000 from a bank. That $250,000 did not exist before the loan. The bank created it, entered it into your account, and you paid the seller. The seller now has $250,000 that did not exist yesterday. Second, a business loan. A restaurant owner wants to open a second location. She borrows $100,000. The bank creates that money. She uses it to pay contractors, buy equipment, hire staff. Those contractors, equipment suppliers, and employees now have money that did not exist before. Third, government borrowing. The government wants to build a bridge. It issues bonds. The central bank, or commercial banks, buy those bonds with newly created money. The government spends that money on construction workers, engineers, steel. Again, new money enters the economy. This is not magic. It is accounting. But it reveals something uncomfortable: money is not a fixed pie. It is constantly being created and destroyed. And the timing of its creation matters enormously. Who gets the newly created money first? That is the question that separates the elite from everyone else. There is an economic concept named after an 18th-century Irish-French banker named Richard Cantillon. Cantillon observed that when new money is introduced into an economy, it does not affect all prices at the same time or in the same way. The money enters at a specific point and then ripples outward. Those closest to the point of entry benefit first. Those farthest away benefit last, or not at all. Imagine you have a pond. You drop a stone in the center. The ripples spread outward. The water near the stone moves first. The water at the edge moves last. New money works the same way. When a central bank creates new money, it typically enters the financial system through large banks. Those banks lend to large corporations, institutional investors, and wealthy individuals. Those borrowers use the money to buy assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity. Asset prices rise. The wealthy, who already owned assets, see their net worth increase. Then, gradually, the money trickles outward. Companies hire. Wages rise. Consumer spending increases. Prices for everyday goods, food, fuel, rent, begin to climb. By the time the ordinary person sees the new money in their paycheck or their grocery bill, the asset boom has already happened. The Cantillon effect, as it is now called, explains a puzzle that confuses many people. After 2008, central banks created trillions of dollars of new money. Economists predicted high inflation. For a decade, inflation remained low. How? Because the new money went into assets before it went into goods. Stock markets soared. Housing prices recovered and then some. Corporate profits boomed. But the cost of bread and milk and gasoline rose slowly. The wealthy experienced inflation in their asset values. The middle class and poor experienced relatively stable consumer prices. But when the pandemic stimulus arrived, the money went directly to households. And then, finally, consumer inflation exploded. The timing of money creation determines who gets rich. Let me give you a stark comparison. In 2009, at the bottom of the financial crisis, the S&P 500 stock index was around 700. By 2021, it reached 4,700. That is an increase of nearly 6 times. If you had $100,000 in stocks in 2009, you would have nearly $600,000 in 2021. You did nothing. You added no value. You simply owned an asset when new money flooded into the system. Now consider wages. Between 2009 and 2019, median household income in the United States grew from about $50,000 to about $68,000. That is an increase of 36%. Real wages, adjusting for inflation, grew even more slowly. The gap between asset growth and wage growth is staggering. Why does this happen? Because new money, when it enters through banks and financial markets, chases assets. Stocks, bonds, real estate, art, private equity. These are the things the wealthy already own. They are the first receivers. They benefit from what economist John Maynard Keynes called the animal spirits of financial markets. But there is a deeper mechanism. The wealthy do not just own assets. They borrow against them. If you own $1 million home, you can take out a home equity loan at low interest rates and invest that money in more assets. If you own a stock portfolio, you can get a securities-backed loan. The wealthy use assets as collateral to acquire more assets. It is a compounding machine. A renter, on the other hand, pays rent each month. That rent goes to a landlord, an asset owner. The renter has no asset. The renter cannot borrow against their rental history. The renter cannot use leverage. Over time, the gap between the renter and the homeowner widens exponentially. Let me give you 2 life stories. They start in the same year, in the same city, with the same income. Person A buys a modest house for $200,000. They put down $20,000, 10%, and borrow the rest. They pay their mortgage each month. Over 30 years, the house appreciates at 3% per year. At the end of 30 years, the house is worth nearly $500,000. Their equity, including what they have paid down, is over $400,000. Person B rents an apartment for $1,500 per month. They save diligently. They put $100 per month into a savings account earning 1% interest. At the end of 30 years, they have saved $42,000. But inflation has eroded its purchasing power. Their real wealth is far smaller than Person A's. This is not because Person A is smarter or works harder. It is because Person A entered the asset ownership system. Person B stayed in the labor and savings system. Now multiply this across millions of people. Add stocks, bonds, and business ownership. Add the ability to borrow against assets to buy more assets. Add the Cantillon effect, which delivers new money first to those who already have assets. You begin to see how the elite print their wealth. They do not print physical banknotes in a secret basement. They benefit from a monetary system that creates money as debt, directs that money through banks, inflates asset prices, and rewards ownership far more than labor. And when the system breaks, when there is a crisis, the response makes the wealthy even wealthier. In 2008, the global financial system nearly collapsed. It started with subprime mortgages, loans given to borrowers with poor credit histories. Banks had packaged these mortgages into complex securities and sold them to investors around the world. When housing prices fell, defaults rose, and those securities became worthless. Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old investment bank, failed. AIG, the massive insurance company, needed an $85 billion bailout. The credit markets froze. Banks stopped lending to each other. Without lending, the economy stops. What happened next is instructive. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department intervened on an unprecedented scale. They created hundreds of billions of dollars of new money. They used it to buy troubled assets from banks. They bailed out the largest financial institutions. They cut interest rates to zero. These actions prevented a depression. Almost all economists agree on that. But they also transferred enormous wealth upward. The bailouts protected bank shareholders, bondholders, and executives. The newly created money drove stock and bond prices higher. The wealthy, who owned most of those assets, recovered quickly. The middle class lost homes and jobs. The gap between the rich and everyone else widened dramatically. Between 2007 and 2010, the median net worth of American families fell nearly 40%. The net worth of the top 10% fell far less. And by 2012, the top 10% had fully recovered. The bottom 90% took nearly a decade to recover their losses. After the crisis, central banks faced a problem. Interest rates were already zero. They could not cut further. So they tried something new, at least on such a massive scale. Quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is simple in concept. The central bank creates new money electronically. It uses that money to buy government bonds and, in some cases, mortgage-backed securities. This pushes bond prices up and yields down. It also injects reserves into the banking system, encouraging more lending. Between 2008 and 2014, the Federal Reserve bought trillions of dollars of bonds. The Bank of England, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan did the same. What were the effects? Stock markets rose. Bond markets rose. Real estate recovered and then climbed. Corporate profits surged. But Main Street did not see the same boom. Wages grew slowly. Small businesses struggled to get loans. The benefits of quantitative easing flowed disproportionately to those who already owned financial assets. A 2019 study by the Federal Reserve itself found that the top 10% of households by wealth held 70% of the gains from quantitative easing. The bottom 50% held just 2%. Then came 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down economies worldwide. Governments faced a choice: let the economy collapse or intervene massively. They chose intervention. The United States alone passed over $5 trillion in stimulus. The Federal Reserve cut rates to zero and launched unlimited quantitative easing. For the first time, much of the new money went directly to households: stimulus checks, enhanced unemployment benefits, small business loans. The results were dramatic. The economy did not collapse. Household savings soared. And then, for the first time in decades, consumer inflation spiked. In 2022, inflation reached 9%, the highest in 40 years. But again, the asset boom dwarfed the inflation impact on most wealthy households. Between March 2020 and December 2021, the net worth of American billionaires increased by over $2 trillion. The stock market hit record after record. Housing prices exploded. The pandemic revealed, more clearly than any economics textbook, the two-tiered nature of the monetary system. The wealthy print their wealth through asset inflation. Everyone else experiences the side effects: higher prices for food, fuel, and rent. The elite do not complain about inflation. They own the assets that rise with it. In 2008, as the financial crisis unfolded, an anonymous person or group using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper. It described a new form of electronic cash called Bitcoin. The key innovation was a decentralized ledger called the blockchain. No central bank. No single point of failure. A fixed supply of 21 million coins. Bitcoin was a direct response to the monetary system we have described. Nakamoto embedded a message in the first Bitcoin block, the Times, 3rd of January, 2009, chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It was a timestamp and a protest. Cryptocurrencies try to solve a specific problem, the ability of central authorities to create unlimited money. Bitcoin's fixed supply mimics gold. If the supply cannot increase, the Cantillon effect cannot operate in the same way. No central bank can create new bitcoins and give them first to the wealthy. But cryptocurrencies have their own problems. Volatility. Energy consumption. Regulatory uncertainty. And, ironically, wealthy investors have become major buyers of Bitcoin and Ethereum, turning them into yet another asset class that concentrates wealth among early adopters. Still, the cryptocurrency movement represents a genuine attempt to rethink money from first principles. It asks, do we need central banks at all? Can money be truly democratic? Those questions are not going away. Central banks have noticed the cryptocurrency challenge. They are now developing their own digital currencies, central bank digital currencies. Unlike Bitcoin, these would be controlled by the central bank. They would be legal tender, like paper money, but entirely digital. Central bank digital currencies offer potential benefits. Faster payments. Lower transaction costs. Financial inclusion for the unbanked. But they also raise concerns. A digital central bank currency could give governments unprecedented control over spending. They could program money to expire. They could track every transaction. They could impose negative interest rates, charging you to hold money. China has already launched a digital yuan. The European Central Bank is exploring a digital euro. The Federal Reserve is studying a digital dollar. The future of money is almost certainly digital and state-backed. The question is not whether digital currencies will arrive. They will. The question is who controls them, and who benefits. After this hour of explanation, you might feel despair. The system seems rigged. The elite print their wealth. The rest of us run in place. But let me offer a more nuanced view. First, understanding the system is power. Most people never learn how money is created. They believe money is a fixed thing that they must earn through labor. Once you understand that money is created as debt, that new money enters at specific points, that assets benefit from inflation while cash suffers, once you understand these things, you can make different choices. Second, the system can be reformed. Higher reserve requirements. Stronger anti-money laundering rules. Taxes on wealth and financial transactions. Public banking alternatives. A sovereign money system where only the government, not private banks, creates money. These are real policy options debated by economists and activists around the world. Third, ownership is accessible to more people than ever before. Index funds, real estate investment trusts, crowd-funded ventures. You do not need to be a billionaire to own assets. You need discipline, education, and time. The earlier you begin acquiring assets, the more you benefit from the compounding effects of money creation. But let us be honest. The system is not fair. It favors those who start with wealth. It amplifies inequality. And no amount of personal finance advice will fully overcome structural advantages that have accumulated for generations. The question each of us must answer is not whether the elite print their wealth. They do. The question is, knowing that, what will you do? We began with a question. Do the elite print their wealth? We have seen that they do not print physical currency in hidden basements. But in a more meaningful sense, they do print their wealth. They benefit from a monetary system that creates new money as debt, channels that money through banks and financial markets, inflates the value of assets they already own, and protects those assets during crises. The elite do not break the law. They do not need to. They operate within a system designed, not necessarily consciously, but certainly effectively, to reward ownership over labor, assets over savings, and proximity to money creation over distance from it. But here is the balanced conclusion. The system also creates genuine wealth. It funds innovation, infrastructure, and enterprise. The same mechanisms that inflate asset prices also allow businesses to grow and employ millions of people. Money creation is not evil. It is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used well or poorly. The greatest divide in modern society may not be between the rich and the poor. It may be between those who understand how money is created and those who do not. Understanding does not guarantee wealth. But ignorance nearly guarantees its opposite. If you walk away from this hour with one lesson, let it be this: money is not real in the way you think it is. It is a social agreement, a ledger, a story we tell together. The people who write that story, the central bankers, the commercial bankers, the legislators, the financial elites, they have power the rest of us do not. But stories can be rewritten. Ledgers can be changed. Agreements can be renegotiated. Not quickly. Not easily. Not without conflict. But history shows that monetary systems evolve, collapse, and are reborn. The gold standard died. Bretton Woods died. The era of free-floating fiat currency may also die, replaced by something we cannot yet fully imagine. Your job is not to defeat the elite. Your job is to understand the game, decide whether you want to play it, and if so, learn the rules well enough to protect yourself and those you love. The elite print their wealth. But you can learn to read the printing press.